Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Getting to the Point. I am your host, Cindy Skalicki of On Point Communications, and my guest today is Cindy Kalman of On Point Presentation. So we are really excited to be here with you today and sharing some of Cindy Kalman's mastery. The interview series that I've started, we're in season 1. It's called Getting to the Point, and what we do in under 30 minutes is get to the point of 3 particular things our speaker is going to explain and that he or she is an expert at. So I'm so pleased to have Cindy with me. Thanks for joining me. How are you doing today, Cindy?
I'm great, and it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you all for coming. It's great. It's a beautiful day, and I'm looking forward to talking to you.
Excellent. Well, I want to share with our audience and those viewers who will pick this up later how you and I met. And, we both have the name Cindy. Our businesses are both called On Point. We both do communication skills and PowerPoint presentations with our clients. So you might think that we would be arch enemies, right? Well, it goes back to the year 2017 when Susan Strong, who is in our call right now, give us a wave, Susan, right? Susan is the executive director at a volunteer group in Boulder called SAGE, and we help groups of entrepreneurs who are founders in the early stages of their business. We help them get, from point A to point B with a team of experts. And Cindy, why don't you tell us what happened when you met Susan at that 1 Million Cups?
Susan, I met Susan at 1 Million Cups, and she invited me to SAGE. And when I started to go to SAGE, we both work for SAGE, but you work more in Fort Collins, and I work more with the Boulder group.
Yep.
And this is how I think it happened, was Susan said, there's another Cindy. And I went, what? And then I learned about you, and I learned that your company's name was almost the same as mine. And I think I emailed you, and then we got on the phone and talked.
Yep.
Even though we sound the same on paper, what we do is quite different. And we learned more about that as we got together and started to help each other out.
Yep, and Bill Dietrich's on the line here too as well. Give us a wave, Bill. Bill is the executive director of SAGE Fort Collins, and he also kind of elbowed me one day and he was like, there's another Cindy with an On Point. And I kind of had a little more of a, what? Are you serious? What happened? How'd she get my name? So, but what happened next was really fun. We came together, had a phone call. Cindy was really open-minded about, us learning about each other, which is always a welcoming feeling to have. And in the beginning, I brought Cindy on to ask her to do some work for one of the slide decks that I was building, because what Cindy does is more advanced in terms of slide design than what I do. I can do a lot with slide decks, and I do, but Cindy provides a higher level and has a fine arts degree and also does animations and much more intricate work with slides than I can do. So she did a little bit of work for me. I provided a little bit of help with Cindy on her brand as she was getting started. And before long, we began to share some clients. So Cindy, why don't you give us a quick rundown of what you do at On Point Presentation, and then I'm going to take us through, we are going to go through together, some slides that are before and after to show the audience what you and I did together on one of our presentations for one of our mutual clients. So tell us what you do at On Point Presentation.
What I like to do to tell people quickly what I do is I help presenters escape the frustration of creating PowerPoint presentations. I have a background in television news, and that really made me want to hone my graphic design business to be more about presentation visuals. So what I really like to do is I like to take words and turn them into impactful visuals that help my clients.
Perfect.
Yeah.
You do some great presentation workshops called The Art of PowerPoint, and you have a real mastery of visual hierarchy on a slide that many people don't come naturally to. And so there's a lot of teaching that you provide. So
Yeah.
are you ready? Can we dig into the situation with our
Yeah.
that we want to share?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I really want to thank you for mentioning that I do workshops that help teach people about graphic design principles that help them make better slides.
oh, absolutely. It's a really valuable service for sure. Well, let's go back. In about 2018, I was actually contacted by someone at the warehouse here in Loveland. And the executive director at that time was in the middle of looking for some funding for a building that they were planning to move into eventually. And they were doing a bunch of fundraising. So for anyone who has not met me, what I provide are kind of two buckets of services. One is in the public speaking coaching realm. So any message you provide verbally from a stage to a lot of people or to one, and also some brand consulting. So that's those are my two sandboxes. Well, this presentation came to me, and at the time that was Brian Pedersen, who was the executive director there, and he asked if I would help him with the slide deck so he could start, getting out there to get some fundraising. So I work with a lot of people who do need a lot of funding. So I called on Cindy because I said, I can absolutely help you with this, Brian, but I think we have some pieces here that would really benefit from someone who's a little more advanced in the slide design components. So with that, we have Allison Seebeck. Allison, can you wave to us a little bit? Thanks, Allison. Allison's the new executive director at Warehouse, and she has graciously given us the thumbs up to walk through a few slides with the audience. So these are old slides, but the lessons are going to be the same in terms of what we've done just from a design perspective. And I want to make a note here too, that the slides you're going to look at right now, these are for a send away slide deck. So a send away slide deck is one that is emailed out to prospective investors or executives at the bank. Obviously, something you send away that people read. Those decks are very different than a presentation you give in person. Send away slide decks, you're allowed to have more sentences. You're allowed to have more text. You need to do a little more explaining so that you can, because you're not there to deliver it yourself. So you'll notice more words, but that is by design. So Cindy, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and switch this up for us so you can share the screen.
Okay. Let me
see it.
I'm going to go in presentation mode.
Yep.
And you should be seeing a full screen shot.
It is not full screen. It is presentation mode. If you can go to.
Is that better?
Yes, that's much better.
Okay. I don't know why it shared the different monitor than I wanted it to, but here we are.
That's okay. That's okay.
So, go ahead, Cindy.
Well, I just wanted to set the stage that this was one of the early slides, and it was about how much Colorado is growing in the next 10 to 20 years population-wise. And it was part of the argument that we were making that there was also a need for this particular entity to get a building that could allow for this type of growth professionally, as well as the population growth that is coming just in terms of our state population. So let's have a look, and you walk us through, Cindy, what you and I kind of talked about and what we did from the before to the after.
When I see this slide, I like to call the audience's attention to that this is kind of typical of a slide that we get in PowerPoint. A lot of centered text, a visual that's not quite working. So that's kind of what we started with. And we ask ourselves all the time, is this slide one or two slides? What best messaging serves the slide? So we moved to something more like this, which is kind of a magazine layout. And even though we're talking about send away decks can have more text, they still need to stay highly visual. You still, when you worked with the client, I think we came upon the idea that what was unique about Colorado was our personal connection with the outdoors. Mm-hmm. And I believe this fishing photo was connected to the client specifically. Mm-hmm. So We put this in a larger format. If you look back here, this is an older format, and this is now the basic widescreen PowerPoint format.
Mm-hmm.
We gave them a better targeted pull-out quote. We added logos that showed Colorado and the opportunity here in Colorado.
Right. These are all companies based in Colorado that have grown, enormously in the last decade or so. We added a rhetorical question to the top so that it would engage the audience. One of the problems with slide decks is they can be incredibly boring if you don't think about your audience and what they're going to do when they read it. So if you can't be with them in person, how can you engage them? Well, you can ask them a question, even if you're not there, and that triggers something in them neurologically to wonder about what that answer could be. And you're right, we wanted a picture that was less corporate business oriented in terms of the previous photo, and we wanted something that was more connective. And this is what we landed on. So perfect. I'm gonna let all of you maybe consider a question or a comment, and I welcome you to input that into the chat at any time. And at the end, I would be happy to go through that, or you can unmute at the end for feedback or questions about what you're seeing right now. So this would be point one of our before and after. And this was early on in the slide deck to set the stage logically and help the audience who's reading the deck understand kind of where we were. So thanks, Cindy. How about?
Okay, I wanted to point out that we also reduced the size of the font in the heading so that more attention was pulled down to the picture and the pull-out quote. And I like to use pictures as big as possible. And this is more of a 1/3, 2/3 kind of magazine layout. Okay, I'm ready now. Here we go.
Okay. Here we go. Next one. All right. I'm going to let you take this one, Cindy. And I would love for your, you've taught me so much about visual hierarchy. So can you talk to us about text size and how people immediately look at a slide and what you need to know?
What I like about this text is that they are trying to make, using text, they're trying to create hierarchy and tell us where to look, but it's not quite working. But at least in this text, they are pointing out and making the headers bold. But I don't know what these logos are doing. And even though they're putting a box around this, it's not exactly where I want to look. So it's lacking visual hierarchy. I don't know where I should look first. And this is a good example of is this one or two slides? What we often talk about when we're starting to design a deck is what needs to be made into a graphic. So in this case, this is what we came up with. Again, we decided the messaging was important, so we made it easier to see, and we created a timeline kind of idea that really pointed to what the logos were doing there. You know, we can clearly see that that these businesses are related to the different stages that the companies are in.
That's what I was just going to say. You created a much more clear relationship. Hang on to that. Go back to that slide one more.
And I love that you use the word relationship, because that's often what we're trying to do.
I think speakers think that they're making a relationship, but the audience isn't picking up on it so many different times. When people make slides, they're like, oh, that's obvious. And I'm like, no, it's not. You need a big box around it, or a line that's connected to it, or, a blowout of it or something. Yeah, I think just to add to your points too, Cindy, the first thing I think when I look at this slide is we've got like 9 arrows that are all bunched up in one place. And I don't like the use of the white space. It's just, white space, as you have talked a lot about in your work, Cindy, is really important. And if you go to you can notice there's no, that's fine, stay here. But the relationships are much more clear, that in stage 1, founders can go to these, Techstars, Founders Institute, and Innisphere, but stage 2 has the standalone opportunity to work with the warehouse, which is what they're specializing in.
And Allison wanted us to mention here that Innisphere now does also support stage 2 companies.
They do. Yeah, they have the scale up program, and that is allows them to have their hands in both of those stages, which is wonderful to see. Since this was built, that is the growth they have experienced, and that's been wonderful. Now,
another thing that we did here, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
Okay. Another thing that we did here is here you notice that big red circle, that was important. Well, here we carried that idea out in not as noisy of a way by taking that warm color, and it really pops out more than these other colors, but we could still see and are guided. And also the arrows, we reduced the size of the arrows and still kind of used their original idea. Okay.
I have a question. Do you have any basic rules of thumb when it comes to font size? And I'm looking at this slide. It's a pretty typical slide as far as order of hierarchy, where you have a title at the top. You might have some kind of images across the center, but then kind of notes, if you will, at the bottom. I find so often that speakers underestimate their audience's eyesight and their abilities. So it's usually too small, or it can be a problem when it's too small. Can you speak to some general font sizes that people should sort of think on in these areas?
I shoot for no smaller than 18 point,
okay,
but that's ideal.
Okay.
And in webinars, the monitor's right on top of people, so that changes a little bit, as do send-away decks. So I start there, and then on graphics, sometimes you need to go to 16 or 14 point because there's a lot of information. But one of my jobs is to make things easy to read. And keeping your font size relatively large helps. And I tend to decrease the header fonts in most of the presentations I use, because I think of the header as like an entryway. That I'm there, and I get it, and I need to focus more on the slide below. So this is still pretty big, but it came down in size.
Yeah, and this, as just for those watching, this is still happening at the beginning of the slide deck to lay the foundation. I mean, what the speaker, in other words, the company, was trying to achieve in this part is more toward education than persuasion on this one slide. There are persuasive elements to this slide, but by and large, you are supposed to be learning. If you're reading this slide, what are the stages of innovation? There's 3, 1, 2, 3. The warehouse fits here. And the subhead gives you a little bit of data that helps persuade you toward understanding that stage 2 is important to support. So I think that's, sometimes in those send away decks, you need to do a little more teaching at the upfront to set the stage. And I use the term sandbox because I hate not knowing what sandbox a speaker is playing in, or what industry they're in, or where my head is supposed to go. If I've never met the person or don't know about the company, you got to put me in a box so I understand what you're talking about. And that's one of the main objectives of this slide. Thanks, Cindy. Do you have any more feedback before we move to our third and final before and after?
I don't think so.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay. All right. Here we go.
Well, this is one of my favorites. We saved the best for last. Okay, go ahead. Explain what we're doing.
Once again, I like that the client is using pictures and they're trying to tell us important information, but everything is important. And that's really confusing about where to look at. And also, one of the things I notice is that people overuse center alignment. And what happens is that center alignment is another way of highlighting information. So everything becomes very busy if everything is centered. So, and
That's
also that's true of underlining. And
mm-hmm.
I don't tend to even like the underlining feature inside of PowerPoint. I'd rather have a ruler like we did in here, create a line rather than use PowerPoint's line because it's pretty heavy. I can't control the length of it easily, or how close it comes to the text. So, okay, let's look at what
So
we
can I
did.
set the stage just a smidge about where we are
Sure,
in the slide deck? Okay.
I'd
And
love
now
you to.
something else just came to me as a reminder. So at this point, this is what I would call, we're into kind of the hero zone of the pitch deck, which means we're introducing the Warehouse Business Accelerator. So this is supposed to be like a nice, beautiful slide that shows the audience what's happening and what is the Warehouse Business Accelerator. So we have kind of a branding statement along the top that I think I created with Brian, or we pulled from other places. And then we're getting into some of the information about Warehouse and what it is. And you can see here, this must be the slide I sent you, Cindy, because I think I picked out these 3 visuals as a way for me to say, hey, Cindy, can you go through all your stock photos? I want a picture of someone, pulling another person upward with their hand, because that's what the Warehouse does for these businesses. They pull you up and get you to the top, and they give you that helping hand. So that's, I think, what I plugged in there, like, help me find the right one with the right tone that has the right look for this audience. And I love what you found, which is on the next slide.
And I really love that you give me those cues.
Well, I love to do that. I just don't have quite the same skill set in the final moments there. But this is what we found, which was perfect. Go ahead, take us through this, Cindy.
And I was going to say that this layout is not that uncommon where we would get 3 pictures. And I know that wasn't your intention, but it does show that if this were from a client, that often one strong picture is better than 3. And what I liked about this kind of layout in a send-away deck is I can use this caption kind of idea. And really, and I love that we found that through stock photo searches, I found a really nice hand up that really said Colorado.
Yep, it definitely does. And it's hitting our audience right where they are, because they're adventurous people. They take high risks. They're starting their businesses and aiming to grow and scale them. And that's the kind of person that they are. So thinking about images, when all of you are looking at images or looking for images, you want to dive into that, that person's archetype or your client avatar, and try to reach them. Think of things they would find exciting to look at, and whatever might build relationship with them. I've been through so many decks in the last couple of days, in fact, where there have been 0 photos of people. And one of the biggest ways, one of the easiest and fastest ways to connect with your audience is by showing photos of people, especially if their emotions are part of that. You can convey things literally in a nanosecond that you would otherwise have to rely on text to do. And that can be just laborious for your audience to look at and have to read and figure out what you're saying. So this looks great. Beautiful. Anything?
There's always more.
I know.
One of the things I wanted to point out is people scan when they see slides. And so we made the pull out larger text. And this is more like what would happen in a book where, oh, this is telling me additional information. And I do want to look here, but I want to look here more. And I tell clients that I often err on the side of really high contrasting fonts and backgrounds, like black on white, because you can't control what people's monitors are going to do. So I know that sometimes when I deal with off shades of gray, which I love, that I don't know what is happening on the other end.
Got it. Hey, Cindy, we have a great question from Allison that I'm sure everyone would benefit from. The question is, what are your favorite resources for finding great images?
Um, One of the resources that I really like is I like Deposit Photo. It's affordable. I really counsel people to buy their images, you know, to not just be looking around. Google's fine for telling somebody on your staff what you need them to find, but not for when you're presenting, because you should own that material. But one of the things too that I get by doing something like Deposit Photo, which offers great affordable packages. So you can get a lot of images for your website, for your social media posts, while you're doing your PowerPoint if you want. The search tools within tools like Deposit Photo and Big Stock Photo and iStock are great. And it really helps me find images that are to the point more rapidly. And it also gives me when I'm looking for photos, sometimes I'm looking for where can I put text? And that's really helpful to see a lot more images so I can go, I need a space over here, or I need to over here, or I need to move this photo over here so I can create a space here. So a lot of the photos, I do special techniques inside of PowerPoint or take them into Photoshop to do just a little bit more. One of the things that happens that's awesome with combining text and photos is we enhance memory.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. That's a huge point. I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you for answering that, Cindy. Another question that's great from John.
I am sorry, my desk just decided to go up.
Oh, it
Go
did.
down. Yes,
That's awesome.
I have a standing desk, and apparently I'm going to be standing.
From your desk. Okay, a question here from John. Cindy is, do you have any tips for selecting color palettes? And I would just say, John, in this particular example that you may have noticed, these are the warehouse colors, the orange and the deep gray and black. So oftentimes it's about branded color palettes, but otherwise, if you maybe don't have that or you want extra pop, what do you think, Cindy?
I start with the company's branding, and then I look at a lot of PowerPoint sites to see what, like color picker sites, to see what colors seem right. I'm mostly still looking for high contrast. And there are tools that you can use inside of PowerPoint that you could get a picture of something that's a likely color palette, and then take picture different points from that and make a color palette off of a visual that you like. So I start with the branding, and then I develop what is the idea behind this and what colors would support that idea, and find visuals and then that work and pick my colors from that.
Got it.
And there's also a lot of choices within inside of PowerPoint itself, which have already made palettes that I can figure out, is this going to support my topic?
Perfect.
Like healthcare might be a softer palette than entrepreneurs in the space industry.
Okay. That's a great example. Perfect. Well, Cindy, I want everyone to know that what they're seeing of your work today is just a drop in the bucket, and that you do some really amazing things beyond what we've seen here, especially with regard to infographics and animations for complex, science or tech companies that require a lot more detail-oriented slide building than I would ever take a stab at doing. So I do want everyone to know that Cindy has those capabilities, even though they weren't on display as much in this particular slide deck. She does have ways to bring to life those relationships that, novices like you and me maybe can't really do in a chart or a table, where they just need that advanced thinking, and Cindy definitely provides that. Cindy, do you want to touch on kind of how you and I work together when we do, and then we're going to wrap pretty soon here to see if anybody has.
That's great, and thank you for saying that, and I feel the same way about your work, that there's so much more that you do than people would know, and I rely on your expertise. So here is a slide-by-slide review. that Cindy developed and that we work with clients together on this document. So when we first get one of the things that I do often is I do what I call a refresh. I'm not starting from scratch, but I'm making the deck better. So a lot of times there's beginning slides that we might work with that we need a blueprint to figure out what are we going to change to this slide deck before I begin working. And that gives it's a great tool for the client to have, because before we start, we're all on board about what needs to happen. Would you like to talk to that, Cindy?
Sure. The slide-by-slide evaluation is what I developed for my clients, and then Cindy and I created our own, which looks like the one you're looking at. But the one that I developed really aims to help people understand each slide. What is the function of the slide? Where is it in the deck, and why is it there? So that helps clients understand the logical flow behind the argument that they're making, because every PowerPoint slide deck that you create, you're making an argument. You're trying to get someone from point A to point B. And then what I like to be sure they understand also is, okay, if that's the objective of that slide, let's say we're trying to get at the pain point or the problem, what kind of visual do we want? What kind of title should we have? And what are some of the bulleted text points that you want to be sure are captured on that? So I might come up with a slide that's like pretty good, and maybe I only need Cindy's help on 4 out of the 20 slides. Maybe I need her help on all of it because it's a really, unique presentation, and it needs that really big bump upward. But yeah, it's basically a tool that we use and then share together to help people really have a solid understanding of, do you need that slide? Is it pertinent? And what's it supposed to do? What's its job? And how are we going to make that job come to life visually and through the right words and text? So yeah, Sydney and I have passed many of these types of, charts back and forth and then we share it with the client, and we just really work as a team together to be sure that all the T's are dotted and the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. So.
And I think it keeps the client involved throughout the whole process. And that really has led to better products and fewer surprises. Yeah,
we did work with an author once recently who was presenting at international conferences, and we helped her with her signature keynote together, and got some really great advice from Cindy on images that she should use. So that's perfect. Thanks, Cindy. Do you have one more slide after this?
I have 2, but I have that.
There you go.
Okay. And then I have us, so that you can get in contact with us.
Awesome.
If it shows does it show the whole picture on your slide?
Almost, not quite.
Oh, that is interesting to know, isn't it?
Okay. We can just, well, how do people get a hold of you, Cindy? We're about out of time. Let me maybe go ahead and just here's a question from Sally. Hold on, Cindy.
Okay.
Here's a question from Sally. How much do you work on the content as opposed to the story arc and the visuals?
Is that for me or for you?
I don't know. Maybe I'll take that one first, and then you can add to the visuals part.
Okay.
So Sally, I would say what's important is about the order in which those things happen. So to me, the story arc is synonymous with the content, because you may remember when I came to see you, I taught that story arc. That has to happen first when it comes to the slide deck being in the right shape as far as the logic. And so I work on the slide design next, and then the visuals come toward the end of my slide deck preparation. I've got to make sure the order of the slides is right first, and then I'll put in like the types of visuals and words I want, and then I noodle it. I noodle it to say, this image needs to be black and white because it needs to say that it's negative and bad and painful. Or I really need to find a better picture of someone crying because their whatever is wrong. Or so I'll kind of save the visual nitpicking and acceleration for the second half of the process. So I hope that was helpful. Cindy, do you want to add anything there?
No, I think that's great. I love when people have a solid script and then bring me on to work with them. Although I can ask a lot of questions to help them get there, it's
Mhm.
much faster if they're working with someone like you to deal
Well,
with
and
that.
I'm sorry to say this, but
Yeah,
there is way more work to be done. Like once the slide deck is perfect, you are not done yet, right? You got to rehearse. And so I definitely
right.
want teachers to have carved out a good chunk of time. And I teach people how to do rehearsing techniques that really maximize your small amounts of time. So that's a huge piece. If you have a beautiful slide deck, what's it worth if you don't rehearse and make it really, and present it with a bang so you can get to that I nailed it feeling. Cindy, I got one more question here that we're going to answer, and then I'm going to have to pause on the questions and wrap. From John, he says, most of my presentations are tutorial teaching, not convincing. How does your advice change for tutorial presentations? Do you have an answer, Cindy?
Yeah. Well, the first thing would want to know, John, is how much time are you giving people to read? And if you're not giving them a lot of time to read, then you want to knock the content on your slides way down. Um, and it's also not an ideal environment for people to read.
No,
Even,
this is John. I do not try to have them read stuff. I actually just have a few tersely worded points that I want to cover.
yeah. I,
Maybe.
go ahead, Cindy.
Well, I'm looking at this from a different perspective, John. I'm looking at it maybe more from the logical perspective. With a teaching tutorial, it would be a completely different setup logically. It would be much more about making sure you have a great introduction of who you are and what you're about to teach, that you have a smashing agenda slide that really helps people know what you're about to teach them so they have expectations set from the very beginning. And then you have, maybe it's 3 sections that you teach, or it's 4
Wow.
or 5. And then you're bringing the audience in to participate, because there is nothing worse than some long-winded tutorial where there's no opportunity for me to either engage or participate or ask questions, or in Zoom, for example, to take a poll. So I don't think the slide design stuff, in my mind anyway, changes all that much as far as needing them to be beautiful. But I see your question more as a structural change versus, making an investor pitch really sing and be persuasive. Is that hitting the mark on your
Yeah,
question?
thanks. That's good ideas. Those are good
Okay.
ideas.
Yeah. Cindy, I think that one of the points you made me think about how important transitions and recapping can be. And that can be reflected in the visuals. And
Absolutely.
without seeing the text, I can't tell if your visuals are working for you now.
Right. Right. Perfect. Well, this has been so much fun. I want to respect everyone's time this morning, and just want to thank everyone for being here. For Allison, thanks for letting us, oh, there she is. Thanks for letting us grab these slides to share some of our expertise from Cindy's side, especially. Cindy, thank you so much. How can people get a hold of you if they would like to know something further? What's your best way to get?
Uh, Ping me on LinkedIn, or if you want to be a part of my newsletter, go to my website, onpointspresentation.com, and sign up for my newsletter.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Well, stay tuned, everyone, for the next episode of Getting to the Point. We run these every Thursday at 10 a.m. They get posted, and so I would love to have you all share the comments from being live on this one today. We will play this out in a replay at a later date, but it's been really fun to have you all here. Wishing you a wonderful day, and get out there and stay on point. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.